So some days a preacher brings something to a congregation that they're unsure will be interesting to anybody but themselves. We'll see. Emerson used to say that he preferred the silence before the service to any of the sermon. We'll see. So I did what I do, and I read that book that I read from this morning, The Good Life Lab, and I had an immediate life transformation that I had to share with my family. And I came home inspired to radically rethink my relationship with the things of the world, to literally take inventory of what we consume and what we build and make in my household. And so I came home, and this is evidence that I'm with the right person. I came home from reading this book and said to my wife, Kate, honey, I think we're supposed to be growing a lot of our food and learning the skills of pickling and canning and preserving those foods over the winter, and we need to put solar panels on the roof and a rainwater collection system in, and then maybe make our own biofuel. And I think that we should be mending our own clothes and making shampoo and soap and deodorant, and we should be exchanging in a gift and barter economy. And my wife said to me, oh, that sounds really nice. And it was evidence that all is good in the white Weishart home. Didn't have to go that way, that conversation. But my wife and I, after reading this book together, decided that we did want to radically rethink our relationship to things. We knew we weren't going to buy a plot of land in the desert of New Mexico. I'm not going anywhere. But we wanted to think about how we live here. And we realized two very important things that made us realize we wanted to change something about our lives. Most things for us didn't have any potential. Most things were delivered or bought pre-packaged, ready-made to serve a very specific purpose. And when they stopped serving a very specific purpose because we didn't know how to fix them, they became waste. The majority of physical objects in our lives were either products designed to serve one purpose or trash. And we didn't like that relationship. If God is creative potential becoming manifest in the world, most things I touched, I didn't see God in. We also realized that we had a fundamental lack of real knowledge about what it takes to make a human being live. I know how to set up an interfaith conference. I can do a fundraising speech. I can write a sermon sometimes. I can read a dead language. I had 3 years of advanced poetic Sanskrit. But I don't know how to build shelter, really grow food, or start a fire. What my wife and I realized as we inventoried our skill sets was that the closer you got to the things that keep a human alive, the less we know. Just speaking for my household. And so we've started a project. That's our soap. Made that soap. Made it with fat and lye. Or, I'm a vegetarian, I made it with oil and lye. We've entered into this experiment and this couple-of-year plan to grow a lot of our food, freeze and can it, make all of our own household products ourselves, learn minor electronics and auto repair and woodworking and welding, sewing, and to put ourselves in a position where we are literally making more and consuming less. Now, that has meant a lot of soap and now making our own shampoo, dishwashing detergent, laundry detergent, hair styling wax and hairspray, hand soaps, liquid soaps, lotions, shaving creams, and much to the dismay of at least one staff person I can see, deodorant. It worked, by the way. But here's the thing that I've realized so far in this experiment, is that in this attempt to make things have more potential in my life, my relationship with the humans that I interact with and the community where I live has actually become a richer experience. After I engaged in this experiment, I started talking to my friends about it. and I found out that each of them had a skill set I never knew about. Somebody was really good at sewing. Someone had a recipe for the best dish. Someone made their own wine or beer. Someone knows how to build a house, and I never knew that. We would sit down and begin having conversations about consumption and money, the kind of life that we want for our children. And these are discussions we never really had before we started talking about things. Now, my small group of friends who lives in the neighborhood that I live in, we've begun teaching each other skills and inviting each other to come over and learn these projects. A friend of mine invited me over. This is not going to sound like a gift, but he gave me the gift of helping him come over and put shingles on a roof on his house because I asked him to. We're in the hot sun a few weeks ago, and he's teaching me how to put shingles on the roof of a house. I'd never done that. And then he showed me how to use a circular saw and a skill saw and a grinder to take rebar out of concrete and really fun stuff like that. And then when we were done and resting, we shared soap and moisturizer recipes. In what looked to be the most awkward beer commercial you'd ever seen. But the relationships between people that I've known for decades is different now. Because we're having to share things. We want to share gifts, a gift economy with each other. And I know that they're capable of more than their ability to buy and sell. Right? My neighborhood looks different. I went to go visit the community garden that's literally a 3-minute walk or drive from my house, and I hadn't gone to meet the guy who started the thing, who goes to Watermark Church, the big church on 635. He told me very quickly about that. I would encourage all of you to tell people where you go to church quickly. When I asked him, why do you do this? He said, well, I don't want to sound preachy. And I said, that's okay. He said, I don't want to sound preachy, but in my church we believe that Jesus' teaching was about taking care of people here and now and feeding people. So I make a garden that you can take from without working. Anybody in the neighborhood who wants it can come and get food. So what he did, this is no small thing. I think a lot of us can overlook a community garden. He turned a commodity, something you buy and sell, into a relationship based on his faith. When I started to look for a way of exercising that didn't involve buying a membership to something, I realized that there is a fabulous, gorgeous nature trail across the street from my house that I hadn't gone to ever in the years I've lived on this side of the city, or my side of the city by the lake. I, in looking up soap-making blogs, discovered that there's a huge community of Christian homeschooling moms in North Dallas who are having an alternative economy. They make and trade their own goods. I saw that there's an Anabaptist commune in Waco that will take you in and teach you how to make a chair or how to start fire. Once I started a new relationship with things, a life and a community that is in this place started to become evident underneath little corners. And you've heard me preach about consumerism before. I've only got 3 or 4 sermons, and this is one of them. But I do it because I think it's one of the most prevalent soul issues we have in our era. We live in a society that literally measures human well-being, literally measures human well-being in our ability and willingness to consume. And we hear on the news that we can't have one or the other. If we have an ability to consume but we don't do it, the economy will stop. And if we have a willingness but not an ability, the economy will stop. We need both, and we need a lot of it, and more is better. On the news every night you hear these measurements. How is America doing? Well, you get the Dow Jones, you get the S&P, you get home prices, interest rates, and home sales. We talk about developing countries, and when we say that word, we don't mean they're developing more compassion. We mean economic development, which is good. People living in poverty need economic development. But we've become very used to measuring our well-being as a society with a balance sheet. By a show of hands, let's say give or take 2,000 points. How many of you could tell me where the Dow is at right now? Okay? By a show of hands, how many of you know how many Americans have 4 or more friends? 15%. How many Americans are happy? A hand. 33%. We don't learn these measurements. We do live in an era in which almost every physical thing that we encounter, we had no part in making it. That's astounding to me. Our music, our entertainment, our food, our furniture, sometimes even our communities are purchased. And I think that a lifetime of these messages has subtle, insidious effects on our understanding of what it means to be a human being. I've talked about the religious term soteriology here before. It's the theological term for what saves us, or what we would say, what makes a human life healed and whole. And our country's answer is consumption. I think when we hear that message, it deeply affects our understanding of what it means to live as a human on this earth. In order for the economy that was described in the readings to exist, everybody in the system at all times has to feel that something is lacking. Everybody at all times has to feel a pervasive sense of lack and want in order for the very foundations of the society to continue. I was talking to members of the staff about this, and one of the young women who works on our staff said that this is particularly interesting for her from a female perspective because of the messages that she literally hears about beauty and value. That she doesn't have what she needs to be beautiful. That's spiritual language, except you hear it on the television. Think of the effects that it has where we work really hard at jobs that most people don't actually enjoy. Spending hours doing things that we could be doing something else, to buy things that we don't need that become trash. Think of the effect over a human lifetime of filling up trash cans with our precious and limited time. I think it's important because we don't notice it. I think we grow accustomed to the notion that if I have a problem, the way I solve it is to purchase something. And I think that then what happens is that I believe that's the source of my real power in the world. Not my creativity, not my compassion, not my generosity, my ability to buy and sell. And because I meet with a lot of you in moments of counseling or life transitions, I know that there is a pervasive sense in this congregation and others that at some core level, each of us is not enough. Not enough for our partners, not enough for this church, not enough for the jobs that we inhabit, not enough for our kids. Deeply not enough. I worry that we're growing used to a world that is prepackaged and ready-made, delivered at a good cost on time with a money-back guarantee. And that's not really what life is. I think we grow used to expecting that relationship with other human beings. I know from firsthand experience how easy it is for us to believe that making it done right means it's okay to kind of run over a few people on the way to that product. But as long as we have a good show on Sunday morning, it doesn't really matter what happened behind the curtain before it got here. We grow impatient with people who don't behave like we expected. I think we grow conditioned to want to give the world a beautiful, shiny package. And I will protect that image at all cost. Now, this is nothing new. Our relationship with things and people being compromised. Our own Saint Henry Thoreau was pretty good at talking about this. He was important enough to me and my wife that we named our son after him. He was kind of a persnickety guy, though. And he's writing about this challenge in the 1840s, okay? This is when horse-drawn carriages and oil lamps are what he encountered. And even in Walden, he's writing saying, oh my God, people are spending too much time trying to get more stuff. He talks about how sad it is to watch his friends inherit a lot of land because then they spend the rest of their life having to maintain it. In a kind of morbid image, he says, it's a shame that you ever have to inherit more soil than you will become. And he talked about how he looked out at his fellow residents of Concord, Massachusetts in 1845, and how he watched this sense of what he called quiet desperation. And that we were quietly desperate, working really hard to go into debt to buy bigger boxes to live in, which is the language he used, which could very well be on the news today. In the reading that Chuck read this morning, I'm not sure I'll make all things clear, especially today. But in the reading that Chuck read this morning, Kathleen Norris references the story of the anointing of Jesus' feet from the Christian scriptures. Do most of y'all know that story? So for those of you who haven't read it in a while or aren't familiar, this is one of the only stories that shows up in all 4 gospel texts. Not every story gets that. Now, it's not always the same woman with the same name. They're not always in the same place. But every single writer, all the 4 different writers and editors, include a story of a poor woman bringing what's equivalent to a year's worth of wages, worth of oil and perfume, and kneeling at the feet of this teacher and bathing his feet in them and wiping them off with her hair and tears. And then the students of this wise teacher, these enlightened young men, do what I would do. They got really angry and judgmental that we could have sold that perfume for a lot of money and fed poor people. What is she thinking? And they say just as much. I know I would do that. I've done that. Every single writer of the gospel included this story, and that's interesting to me. These people are wandering the desert teaching about human love and acceptance, and when this poor woman spends a year's worth of wages on a person she loves, their first response is, do you not know how much that costs? This is 2,000 years ago in the desert. If we don't have a right relationship with things, our relationship with people and our ability to be deeply good for one another is compromised. And our ability to be deeply good for one another actually is our product. That's all I have to give you. That's it. I can't promise you that I know what happens when you die, or that I will make your life any easier if you participate here. Actually, I'm certain your life will be harder and more complicated if you take this church seriously. I promise. But I can promise that we will get better at being as good to as many people as we can. That's church. The church staff gets tired of a phrase that I use with them when I say it's just church, which actually means it's so important that if we get fixated on the product instead of the process, we're not actually making church. If we get upset that there are 9 chairs in the room instead of 10, we're not actually making church. Or that the tablecloths weren't as white as they needed to be for the event. Or a million other things. I mean, if you've served on a church committee ever in the history of any church, you know how possible this is. Letting a product get in the way of building deep and meaningful human relationship with people. Now, the Christians believe God is relationship. For them, God's never alone. In fact, God is 3 people who have always been together and will always be together. Now, we don't affirm the Trinity, but we do affirm in our principles that there is an underlying interdependent nature of all existence that includes us. Right relationship is our product. And as we enter into a year of creativity, I think it's a good thing for this church. This church has so many incredible skills. And this church is filled with a lot of professionals who are measured by the quality of their work showing up in a bright, shiny package delivered as promised, on time, at a good cost, and we are in a neighborhood that is very good at holding up a bright and shiny package in an image of perfection. And I think that we need a year of creativity and risk-taking and imperfection, because I'm looking out right now, looking at people that I know on this Sunday, I know you, looking like you're holding it all together, who when I talked to you the last time weren't. And I know how scary it can be in this church to show it. When I was in a Southern Baptist church growing up, it was par for the course for people to stand up and to cry or to say, I'm struggling, and that's not a very Unitarian thing. And it made me incredibly uncomfortable a few weeks ago when I found myself crying in that chair on this chancel. My friend's baby had just died. My son's first friend. We had the same hospital delivery, we had the same doula, we had gone through all of the stages of our early parenting together, and then I sat with him in hospital rooms week after week as he was waiting for his child to end her life, and then she did, and I didn't cry for a week. And then in the one time I didn't want to, I mean, the 1 hour in the week, I found myself in that chair, not with a dignified tear running down my face, but with head in my hands, kind of heaving, snotty kind of crying. And I was deeply embarrassed by it. Deeply embarrassed. First of all, it's hard to break down in front of 400 people. But a part of me worried that I had lost credibility, that I hadn't produced the bright, shiny, together package that I was called to do. And I know that's not true. But I've seen firsthand in a lot of instances in my life as a minister, as just a citizen in this country, what an understanding that our human value is based on a balance sheet or our perfection. I know what it can do to us. And so this year, in a year of creativity, I hope that what we will discover and practice is really grace. Something we don't talk about much in a Unitarian Universalist church, although it's what our Universalist ancestors were all about. It's the notion that we practice over and over again, looking at the world and deeming it good. Enough. We look at ourselves and we say, enough. We practice looking at other human beings and realize that they have potential far beyond their monetary value or their ability to consume or their ability to show up how we want them to show up. To practice making stuff and to fail. Because every time we do, we recognize that we have a skill and a value that is bigger than our ability to consume. And that is actually especially valuable for people who can afford to do otherwise. I hope this year is an invitation for you to let the seams show a little bit here and to practice patience and grace and living well with imperfection and saying over and over again to yourself and to this world, enough. And that's probably enough for today. Amen.